can find a wealth of information there. You can join for free, and you can check out your find out on your own. Plug in your mother and your father's name, and then you basically start with yourself, and you work your way backwards. You put in all the information of the people your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, whatever, and then you find out that, oh, by the way, before I go into that though, as a result of the DNA test that I did, it also matches you to people who match your DNA test. It matches your genetic stuff, whatever. Other people who match your genetically, I should say, with other people who are on Ancestry.com who've also taken a DNA test, and it shows you your second cousins, your first cousins, your relatives or whatever, fourth cousins. I found 357 relatives, genetic relatives of mine. Now, some of them were distant, but most of them were third cousins and second cousins. So it's pretty fucking awesome. To be able to do that, because my best friend I mentioned earlier, he just did the DNA test for his mother because she was adopted, and she she has no idea where she comes from because when she was born, she was dropped off at a nunnery or something like that, an orphanage or something, in a bassinet, and no one knows where she came from. So the only way for her, and it was a closed adoption, and the records are sealed and they'll never be opened or whatever. There are no records. So what was I saying? So she, what was I going to say? I'm sorry. And so because of the DNA testing, she now has found a second cousin. She's found a second cousin. So this is a relative of hers to whom she's related to genetically. And because she's related to this person genetically, she knows it's a real family member. And so my best friend, is contacting this person through Ancestry.com to see if they're willing to talk to his mother, because she may be able to find out her last name and where she came from, or if there was any kind of indication that she ever existed to this family or whatever. But it gives her some sense of where she comes from. And all of us as human beings want to know, where did we come from? Who are we? And who you are is not just made up of who you are in your everyday life. It is made up of who you are, your ancestors were. And that's why it's so important to know where we come from. So anyway, back to Ancestry.com. So if you get on Ancestry.com, you join, it's free at first. And then you can get a free trial. You can search for people, and once you get people in there, and you get these little leaves that come up, and these leaves have hints, and it'll show you public records like birth certificates or death certificates or marriage certificates or census records and military records, whatever, that can help you piece together. It's basically a big puzzle where you come from, and your ancestors were and who they were. And the interesting thing is, the farther you work back, the more and more you find out. And the more you find out who you're related to, and you could be surprised. And it takes a while. Like I said, I've been doing this for 16 years on my family tree, and so, but it is possible. And you begin to see a picture of who you're made up of. And so that's why I love that show, Who Do You Think You Are? Because it really is about that. It's putting a puzzle together, and that puzzle, when it's finished, is you. The puzzle is you. The puzzle that you're putting together is a picture of yourself and all the people you're made up of. So it's really fascinating to me, and I just thought I would share these things with you because I find it really very cool and a lot of fun and just very interesting. And especially if you're gay like I am, and you have people, gay people a lot of times don't have a big connection to their families because a lot of times we're estranged from them or whatever, because they disowned us or don't like us because we're gay or because of religious convictions or whatever other reason. And so a lot of times we're disconnected from our ancestry, and we look at it as tradition or something that we don't want to be part of. But even if you're not part of your family, you can still find out where you come from genetically and who makes you up. So I think everybody who does their family tree will walk a little taller and find out who they come from, because everybody has somebody who has a story in their family, whether they're famous or royalty or not, whether they were in the military, whether they were just an everyday farmer. If you delve into each story and find out on your own through newspaper records and the things I mentioned earlier, you can really paint a picture of that person's life and see yourself in that ancestor. So I really find it to be fantastically interesting. one more thing I want to talk about quickly is race in general, and I'm just going to touch on this because I've done whole shows on race, and I've talked about most of what I want to say before, but I just want to touch on it real quick and say that, you know, this is why it's so interesting to me that people look at race as if it's some finite thing. You know, you're black, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're Asian, whatever, because you look this way. You look black, so you're black. You look Hispanic, so you're Hispanic. You look white, so you're white. But race is an illusion. It has nothing to do with anything. First of all, as I've said before, all it is a combination of genetic lottery, of the genetic lottery. So what I'm saying is, well, as I was mentioning earlier, people often look at me and they think that I am Middle Eastern, or they think that I'm Hispanic, or sometimes white occasionally, but not as much as I used to get because I'm darker than I was when I was younger. But tanner or whatever. But you know, people look at me and they think they know what I am. They perceive me to be these things, and therefore I am those things in their minds. But the reality is, I'm not. As I just mentioned to you, based on my DNA test, obviously, and which is science and it's true and real. I am not Hispanic at all, 0% Hispanic, and I'm 0% Asian, and I'm 0% Native American, according to this thing, although it said 0.8% or something on that one. And then I'm 0% Middle Eastern. And so it's just funny to me that everybody perceives me to be the things that I'm not. No one perceives me, rarely people perceive me to be biracial, half black, half white. No, hardly anybody ever says I'm black. Hardly anybody ever says, you know, thinks I'm white or whatever. They always think I'm Hispanic or Middle Eastern or Greek or something kind of swarthy like Italian or Orthodox or whatever. I don't know. So my point is that just because I look a certain way doesn't mean fucking shit. Race is nothing. Race means absolutely nothing. That's why it always makes me laugh when people put so much fucking emphasis on race as if it is anything at all. All it is an illusion. It's the paint. It is the color. It is the exterior shell in which we inhabit. And it has nothing to do with what is important about we as human beings. It only has to do with the superficial. And because we are a superficial society, there's so much emphasis put on it. And I did a whole article on this a long time ago called The Truth About Race. You can look it up at mootmagazine.com and look for the article entitled The Truth About Race. You can read the whole thing there. But I discuss on there why there are races, where race came from, what it really is, and what it means to be a specific race. And ultimately, you will see in an article that I come to the conclusion, as anyone with a brain would, that it doesn't fucking mean shit. You know, I don't get people who are racist. I just don't get them. I mean, maybe it's because I'm you know, of two races, and I've had to endure racism to some degree most of my life. And there are people who are who have to endure racism far more than I do because of the way I look. Hold on a second. But excuse me, I had a sneeze attack. It's allergy season here. Because people who don't look like me, and what I mean by that is I have light skin, I have light eyes, I have my hair straight because I straighten it because it's naturally curly. I have pretty Caucasian features and face and everything else. So it's not like I have to suffer, as quote unquote, suffer through racism the way a lot of people do. It doesn't mean I've experienced it. I've absolutely experienced it in every facet, in every way that any black person or Hispanic person or any other race, minority race has experienced it. I have. My point is, I haven't had to endure it to the degree that someone who is an African American 100% or is Asian 100% or whatever, that you can visually look at and say this person's black or this person's an Asian American or Hispanic or whatever, that they have to endure it because people don't always know what I am, as I've mentioned throughout this show today. They don't necessarily know what I am, so they don't know to necessarily always, discriminate against me. As I said, it's all about their perception of who and what I am, and their perception typically is off. So for one way or the other. So, and I know when I've told people that I'm biracial and half black and half white, almost all the time they're almost always shocked. And they're like, really? I never would have guessed. And I know that that's not like necessarily meant to be a negative statement. Excuse me. But it is kind of, to me, it's like, well, what does that mean? You never would have guessed. It means that you look at me and you never would have guessed that I'm part black, right? But why is that? I mean, the way they say it, it's always like it's a good thing. Instead of saying it like, oh, really? That's interesting. It's like, oh, well, I never would have thought you were that because you don't look it. It's like that. And so it's very offensive to me because I've always been, people have tried to make me choose this side or that side. You're black, you're white, what are you? Which I should fucking name my goddamn autobiography someday. What are you? Because I've always had to, endure that sort of question all of my life. It's been a bit of a issue, but for people to understand that I am both. I mean, why it's so hard to understand? I'm 53% European or white, and I'm 47% African or black, as some people like to say. What the fuck does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. Your race doesn't really mean anything about who and what you are as a human being. It only means this is what your shell looks like. That's it. It's 0.01% of who we are, literally, through DNA of who we are. The rest of us, the other 99% of what we're made of, the other 99.9% of what we're made of is far more important than that 0.01% of what we look like. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that tonight and say that if you are racist, if you are someone who actually has to endure these racist bigots and these assholes, who the fuck cares? I mean, I've gotten to the point in my life where I just don't care. I've gotten, partly because of the DNA tests and partly because of the ancestry I've discovered over the past 16 years, and the proudness I have as a result of knowing where I come from. It's like I'm almost bulletproof from those sorts of things, from being called a nigger or being called an Oreo or being called whatever I've been called in my life as a result of being biracial. I'm almost bulletproof because emotionally, bulletproof because it doesn't bother me because I'm strong and stand in who and what I am, and I like who I am. If you don't like who you are, it's hard for you to let those things slide. But I like who and what I am, and I like what I look like. I like what I'm made of. I love the fact that I'm biracial. It gives me a special perspective that very few people have, especially the black-white sides of things. And I love it. And I honestly don't want it any other way. I honestly don't. And I like myself. And so it's very funny to me when people are trying to be racist or racial towards me in some form or fashion, which doesn't happen very often anymore, but when I was a kid or whatever. But when it does happen these days, it's just sort of like, okay, whatever. I look at the person with pity. I honestly do. I look at these people with pity because they're ignorant, and they really are ignorant. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. People who are racist or white supremacist or whatever, KKK people, whatever it might be, are just ignorant. And that's the only word for them, meaning they really don't fucking know anything about what they're talking about. They are people who they ascribe particular traits to people based on race rather than on the character that they possess. And only an ignorant person would do that, because someone who actually has a fucking brain and wisdom would know that how one behaves and has nothing to do with a race in terms of the overall broad spectrum of things. Okay, I think I'm talked out now. I just want to say all that tonight. I want to thank you for listening if you listened this long, and I want to thank you for listening to the show on the Off Limits show here. By the way, if you want to check me out, you can go to Spreaker.com and listen to all of the shows. If you're listening to this show on iHeartRadio, you only get a very small selection of the shows that I do on the show. So if you want to see all the shows that I do, you can go to offlimitshow.com and you can listen to them there, or you can go to Spreaker.com and see all the shows that I've ever done. You can also listen on iTunes if you want to subscribe to to The Off Limits Show, go to iTunes and look for Off Limits Show. You can also subscribe to Brain Purge and to Gay Mass, both those shows I do as well on iTunes, and be happy to have you be a listener. If you ever have any questions for me or comments, you can always tweet me on Twitter at Off Limits Show or on Facebook as well.